Our reading from the Gospels today will be taken from the Gospel according to Matthew chapter 11, verses 16 through 19 and 25 to 30. The Spirit will speak something into your life today if you will listen with an open ear. And so listen to whatever it is that the Spirit might speak to you in this reading from Matthew. Jesus is speaking here, and he says, "But to what shall I compare this generation? It is like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling to one another, 'We played the flute for you, but you did not dance. We wailed for you, but you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say, he has a demon. And the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, look, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is vindicated by her deeds.' At that time, Jesus said, 'I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and intelligent and have revealed them to infants. Yes, Father, for such was your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all you who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light.'" This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Come to me, Jesus says. Or as I learned it, and if you learned it in the old King James, come unto me. Come to me, all you who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy, and my burden is light, and you will find rest for your souls. You know, these words were preached at my ordination, and every time I hear them, they catch something inside of me. You could almost weep for the beauty of them. Jesus is touching on something here, something that we all feel, that deep down in the bone weariness with the world such as it is. This fatigue, he's speaking directly down the ages across the centuries, directly into your life, directly into mine. Come to me. I have rest for your souls. It's not no burden. It's a better burden. It's a burden that fits better. It's a healthier burden. It's a burden that's worth it. He's named something for which we have no name, but something that we all feel. We need rest. Rest in our souls. In old age, the philosopher and theologian, my favorite, Paul Tillich, said that these words haunted him as a child and they haunted him still as an old man. I mean, why are our souls so tired? Maybe we don't really know how to care for them, and we don't, but I think more than that, it's because we're always placing the wrong burdens upon them, things they cannot begin to bear, things that are too heavy for them, things that were not meant for them to bear. Our bodies? Oh, our bodies get plenty of rest. Our bodies are good. Our bodies are coddled and soft. Our bodies are fine. They get lots of rest. Our minds, they're coddled and soft too. They get lots of rest. We have news networks to do our thinking for us, and calculators and Google. Our minds are fine. They get lots of rest. But our souls? That's the part that gets worn out, because it's in the soul that we feel the worries and the cares of current events and politics and violence and fear. My body and my mind, they get all the rest they need, but my soul? You promise me rest for my soul, and I will come to you. I'll even come unto you. I will come to you if you promise me rest for my soul, and I'll see what you've got on offer. Only God grant us the originality to crawl out from under the burdens that crush them, the unnecessary burdens, the burdens that were not meant for them. God grant us the courage to say no more, to lay down those other burdens and get a better one. Garrison Keillor was the great radio personality from A Prairie Home Companion. I think I've told you this before. He once said that you're never old as long as your mother is still alive. You're never old as long as your mother is still alive. I used to say, unfairly, and I no longer say it, but I used to say you're never old as long as you still have a college friend who's not married. I stopped saying that, of course, because it's unfair to single people. It assumes that marriage is the normal state of all people, and I've become sensitive to the fact that single life is also a calling and a joy. And so I don't say that anymore. But my theory, back in the days when I did say it, was that you finally sink into middle age when the last bachelor friend from your old college clique calls you up and says, "Hey man, I need you to rent a powder blue tux," which happened to me just a few years ago. And it felt odd in my early 50s. Hermann Hesse, the Swiss novelist, wrote a book called Knulp. That's a mouthful, Knulp. And it's about a character named Knulp. And it's about this phenomenon. It's about this fellow named Knulp who just lived this free life. He had no career and no family. He just went about visiting friends and meeting people in the streets and having conversations and crashing on people's couches and living that free life that sometimes we all dream about. I mean, admit it, a little bit. An idle life of simple joys, no career, no family, going from town to town, never putting down roots, disappearing into the night anytime anyone tried to put a yoke around his neck, romance, work. But Knulp has so many friends, they love to see him come and they hate to see him go. Knulp shows up and everybody gets their guest room ready. They know that when Knulp is in town, they'll laugh late into the night. They'll remember old times. They'll think about their life as it was before children, before work, before careers, and all its responsibility. Do you have a friend like Knulp? I don't know. I don't. I used to until I got married. Knulp, in all his roving freedom, helped them to forget that their lives were tethered to certain responsibilities and burdens that they had chosen. And at the end of the book, Knulp is dying of some homeless person's disease, tuberculosis, consumption, I don't know, it's an old book. And he travels back to his hometown to revisit again the places and the faces of his youth. And an old acquaintance sees him in the street and says, "Knulp, it's you." And he goes on to say, "Look, here I am at my age, breaking rocks beside the road to earn my daily bread. But you could have done anything, man. You could have been a physician, you could have been an artist, you could have been a writer, you could have been a teacher. You could have been a leader of people." And then the old acquaintance says something quite judgmental. He says, "Don't you know that you'll have to answer to God for all that you have wasted in this life?" And poor Knulp, he's already dying. And he's saddened by this thought that his life has kind of been a waste. And so he wanders off into the forest to talk to God, which is always a good idea. And he lives in summer homes that are closed for the winter, and he breaks into people's hunting cabins and sleeps on their cots. And as he lies there dying at the end of the book, he asks God in his delirium, "Why couldn't I have done something different with my life? Why couldn't I have had a career? Why couldn't I have had a spouse, maybe some children that look up at me and call me dad? Why did I have to be transient?" In the end, even the free-willing Knulp wishes that he had found the right yoke for his neck. And in his final illness, he hears God's tender reply, "You had a higher calling. Your task was to make people desire freedom." I thought it was a good line, because we all desire it. We all desire freedom from the burdens that we have kind of chosen for ourselves, the burdens that our life's trajectory have put upon us, that we have assumed were there for us to pick up. If I had to admit it, I liked it that my old friend Tim was still unmarried until just a few years ago. Because even though I never did it, I felt like, Tim, oh yeah, I could call him up anytime and he'd be ready to go. Go camping, go climb a mountain, go on a road trip. Stuff that you need at least 6 months advance notice to do when you're married with children and a career. His singleness made me feel young. Marriage and family, like all good things, they come with their shadow side. Don't all of your joys weigh something? Isn't every joy a burden? Is there joy without heaviness, without weight? What is a good burden? Give us rest for these exhausted souls. I think about these words. Come to me and you will find rest. Think about these words and how they might have sounded to the original audience as they echoed out over the narrow streets and the barley fields and the pastures and the fish markets of Galilee. In that time, in that place, there was no rest except the Sabbath. From childhood and into old age, life was work. Work was life. It was a place of constant labor. There were no child labor laws in those days. If you were a kid, you helped the family bring in money. There was no Medicare or Medicaid for when you got too sick or too old to work. If you had anything at all, as you have been told many times, it was by the sweat of your brow, the calluses on your hands. The only callus I ever had was from writing, and then that went away when we stopped writing with pens and pencils. And when you ceased to work, if you had nobody to provide for you, you ceased to have what you needed. And it wasn't 8 hours a day, it was all day that you worked, except the Sabbath. How did these words of Christ fall on the ears of people whose life was work all the time? Those tired souls whose only respite came on Sabbath. Those words, as they heard them above the din of their crowded streets. As his words resounded over market and loom and workshop and field and the places where they earned their daily bread, what did it mean to them? Come to me. You're tired, I know you are, and you'll find rest for your souls. I will give you rest. And yet, you probably haven't just read the book of Matthew straight through, but if you have, congratulations. And yet, if you had read the book of Matthew straight through, you would remember that just a few chapters ago, this same Jesus said, "Take up your cross and follow me." And that to me does not sound like a light burden. That to me does not sound like a Sunday afternoon at the lake. That doesn't sound like rest to your soul, does it? And that's light, this cross that you want us all to carry? This is the strange twist that our faith insists upon. Our souls can't find rest by fleeing from the tasks and the burdens of the world and seeking the path of least resistance. Our souls cannot find rest by abdicating responsibility for the world. No, the heaviest burden of all might be to try to go through life without any burden, without shouldering our share of this world's load. And we will, every one of us, shoulder a burden in this life. But is it one worth your energy? Is it one worth your life? Is it one worth your time? Is it a burden of appearances, of money, of success, of mammon? Or one of the good burdens of following after Christ? Are you pouring your life's store of energies into the right stuff? You're carrying burdens for sure. Are they the right ones? Do they fit you? Are they appropriate to you? Or are you plagued by burdens that load you down and bring you fear and insecurity and shame? Isn't this the great irony of life? Isn't this the paradox of rest? Rest for our souls. That we will always be weary until we find the right yoke, not no yoke, but the right yoke to fit upon our necks. That we will forever be restless until we discover the joy of good and meaningful burdens. That we will always long to give our life and its energies to some real demand. Something that asks something of us and asks us to give back to something bigger than we are. The right burden is still a burden, but for all its labor, it gives us joy. Oh, you who I hope at least in part come here seeking rest for your souls. You must give your life and its cares, your life and its responsibilities to the one who made it. Come to me, all you who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. I think about my grandparents. I wonder if your grandparents were the same. They were so ashamed of rest. They were not allowed to rest ever. Think about your grandparents. Mine were definitely like this. We Americans have a complicated relationship with rest. We give it lip service, but we're secretly ashamed to get caught doing it. And we secretly applaud the employee who sends work emails at 6:15 in the morning on a Saturday. Work is sacred. Work is good. You're loyal. You're dedicated. You're committed. That's who you are. And the vast domain that is America was not built upon rest. And I have to admit, some of the longest living people I've known have been the busiest and the hardest working. Work and productivity are our way of life. I could almost believe that people today are more overworked than people in the past. With our late nights and our working from home, which means that we're never free. You have a thought, you go to your computer. What an imbalance it is that we will pay $50 a month for a gym membership, and then we will go to the gym and circle the parking lot until we find a spot right close to the door. So many imbalances in our lives. I think about my grandparents. I never knew any of them to take a vacation ever. They never went camping. They never went to the beach. They never went to the lake. They might have a picnic on a Sunday. When they weren't laboring on a time clock or doing something else like that, they were working in their gardens or in their garages or in their cellars or at their woodworking shops. I don't know when they rested. They were positively ashamed of sitting down to rest. My grandmother loved no Bible verse more than this one in Proverbs that says, maybe you know it, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and so shall thy poverty come upon thee. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, and learn its ways. Honestly, if one of my grandparents dozed off in front of the TV because the TV was always on at their house, if one of them dozed off in front of the TV at the end of a hard day and they would awaken with a jerk, the first thing they would say is, I wasn't sleeping. They were ashamed. They felt like work was the only thing of value. Rest is not good. It means you're going to fall into other sins like drinking and dancing and lying and cheating and stealing. Maybe America wasn't built on rest, but it was built with an understanding of that ancient Hebrew notion of Sabbath, the best thing Judaism gave to this world, aside from Jesus himself. This idea of Sabbath, this idea that your life needs seasons in which to sit fallow on a regular basis, that you need to let it be, just be, and don't do. Have times when you can just be on a regularly scheduled basis. You can't be productive. The field of your life can't be productive unless it's given times of fallowness. But that takes discipline, and maybe discipline is the light burden. Maybe discipline is the burden that Jesus is talking about here. It's not more work that we need. It's discipline for the work we've got. It is a discipline to turn off your phone. It is a discipline to go to church on a Sunday morning. It is a discipline even to join us online. It is a discipline to maintain a healthy body, a healthy mind, a good diet, good self-talk. That's a discipline. Watching the way you speak to others, that's a discipline. There are good disciplines that actually, once you get them going, make your life better and happier, and they end up being a light burden. The yoke of Christ is not merely about a random list of good deeds to the less fortunate, though it is that. It's a life of discipline, intentional, regular, ongoing discipline. The yoke that frees us from the pitfalls of too much freedom is discipline. It means making yourself do the things that you probably don't want to do, but which, in a little while, you will be grateful that you did. Also, I think this, having just gotten back from a 70-mile backpacking trip, don't you think that your soul is healthiest when your body is tired? Have you never discovered this? Your soul is actually at its best when you have worn yourself out physically. In that moment, there's a kind of freedom. It's good for the soul when you maintain disciplines of physical activity. What could be better for the soul than taking the stairs rather than an elevator? I would like to tell you that's why we have no elevator in this church. I don't think that's the truth. But think of the things. What could be better for your soul than swimming laps, running, lifting, stretching, doing yoga? These things are a physical form of prayer, and you rarely regret having done them later on. Tired body, healthy soul. I sometimes believe that walking and avoiding sugar are the keys to happiness, and then I remember Kit Kats. I guess it's probably not that simple, but discipline, consistent, healthy, habitual disciplines are life's lighter burden, and they save us from many an unwanted burden later on, all the while adding to the sweetness and the order and the beauty of our lives today. What disciplines? What disciplines do you practice? What are they adding to your life? What disciplines have you always felt like you ought to pick up but haven't quite gotten around to yet? I would encourage you to examine them. Discipline is the light burden. You know, if you've ever seen a yoke, and most of us probably have not, we've seen them on TV in places like India. But if you've ever seen a yoke, very few of them are single. Most of them are double. Most yokes are built for at least two, team of oxen or horses or whatever you've got. Most yokes are built for two because the best burdens are shared. Shared with somebody. Shared with someone you love. Shared with your community of faith. Shared with Christ himself. The best burdens are not the ones that we have to struggle to fulfill on our own. We share them with somebody else along the way. Beware the solitary burden. It might be the burden for you, but the best burdens have two spots, or more than two. Sometimes four, sometimes 8. What needless burdens do you carry? We have so many. All of us have so many burdens that we carry from place to place to place. And there is no need. We don't need to carry them. They belong to somebody else. They belong to God. They belong to the past. They belong to the future that we cannot change yet. They belong to something else, and we don't need to be carrying them. What burdens do we carry? Are they the yoke of Christ? And if not, what would it take to lay them down? To do your best to set them aside and say, that's not mine, not for today, maybe someday. That's not mine today. Today I will bear the burdens for today. This is the topic of a future sermon, and I hope I won't forget this. Letting go of the things that were never meant for us. But that is a future sermon. For today, consider unhitching yourself from the unnecessary burdens and, as best you can, walking away. But do not walk away thinking that you will get no burden. Everybody gets a burden. We wouldn't be happy or healthy without them. Our shoulders were created for carrying loads. We will not go through life unencumbered. But is the load that you carry worth your energies? Is it worth your time? Consider the call of Christ upon your life and your time, your commitments, your resources. What discipline is calling to you? And because I think these words are so perfect and so beautiful and I cannot improve upon them, I'm going to read them to you one more time. Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Amen.